Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Teresa Bullard, and here with me is Lilith Reese, and we're going to have a conversation about a topic of cults. Lilith here actually was raised in a cult, and now she has come to a point in her life where she has broken out of that many years ago and has gone through a whole process of healing and kind of peeling away the layers of that cult experience and come into a very empowered place in her life. And she's also a member of the Modern Mystery School. So we thought her story would be a good example of the difference between when someone actually is part of a real cult versus what is the Modern Mystery School, which we do not believe is a cult. So we want to give you a little bit of a sense of the difference, and also how Lilith, can really speak to it from a unique place. So Lilith, can you, thank you first of all for just being willing to talk on this subject. I'm sure it can be, a little bit of a sensitive subject at times. So maybe you can just share with us first of all, how it came to be that you were raised in a cult.
Yeah, so I was born in Huntsville, Alabama, and they would say brought to church as a baby in a blanket. From day one, I was brought up in a community. Granted, there was no physical fences or boundaries around the community, but it was on a mountaintop. And I recall growing up through the years, there was always this fear, and we were told if you leave the mountain or you leave the church up here, horrible things will happen to you. So that's kind of like the overall, it felt like a cap, almost like an umbrella put on the top of this mountain, and the 200 plus people who were attending this church. It was just capped over us, and within it there were aspects of positivity, and I would say virtues that are important to life. They supported family and being faithful to your spouse and loving your family and supporting community. But ultimately those virtuous concepts were taken and used against the individuals in a really twisted way to control them, to make them think there was nothing outside of the church, and if they left the church that horrible things would happen. And oftentimes people would leave the church and horrible things would happen because they believed it would, and naturally they would manifest it. And then there are wild cases like mine where I left the church and I didn't believe it. I knew there was something more, and I created a beautiful life for myself. And since I left, actually, I would say a handful and many, many more are steadily leaving that limited mindset, leaving the church and realizing wait a second, I don't have to be in fear. As long as I'm a good person, I can create a good life. Yeah.
So everyone lived together basically in sort of this community, or would you call it a compound? Or
no, it wasn't a compound. It was more usually within 2 to 3 to 4 or 5 miles from each other.
Mm-hmm.
So we all had our own homes, but every Sunday and every Wednesday we'd go to church, and then we were homeschooled, and we were all homeschooled together. I would say 99% of us kids were homeschooled together. So we had,
so
the community together.
Fairly insular and sheltered, or
there was no
that community.
Totally, there was no movie theaters. There wasn't public school. It was shunned or taboo to be a student in a public school because they were oh, you'll get, the evil forces will brainwash you or whatever. So we need you to stay together in this kind of umbrella of being schooled by your parents or people who go to that church. Yeah.
Okay. And then as a woman or as a girl in that church and in that community, how did they treat you as a woman? Right?
Yeah, so when I think back on it, some of my earliest memories were of being told that I had to dress modest, which meant covered head to toe. I couldn't wear anything shorter than calf length. My sleeves had to be at least here. If you could look down to see your neckline, it was considered too low, so it had to be where you couldn't see your neck. And it's all around making men lust. So there was this whole thing that was projected at me from very early on. I mean, I could be 8, 9, 10 years old, just starting to get, breasts and so forth, developing as a young woman does. And yes, I was wearing dresses. I was what the world would consider extremely modest, but in their eyes, it was constantly nitpicking at me because I was an attractive woman, even if they covered me head to toe. So I was actually being I would say, not only criticized, but recommended a lot. It was like, it didn't matter what I did, it was never good enough. And like, as a woman, there was immense amount of, I guess, suppression around the sexual energy. Like, you weren't supposed to be beautiful, because if you were beautiful, then you would make men lust, and if you make them lust, then you'll go to hell. So as a child, like 8, 9, 10 years old, I remember being told and hearing, like, it's better for a mote to be hung around your neck and to be tossed into the sea than to harm one of my little ones. And these grown married men being one of God's little ones, and there I am, a young girl, woman, causing them to lust, and it was being put back on me. It was gnarly.
So that's a huge responsibility put on your shoulders as a young girl, that if anyone lusted after you, it was your fault.
Yeah, and so in my consciousness, there was some type of shield around my consciousness, I would have to say, because it would be projected at me, but I liked who I was and I knew who I was inside, so somehow I was able to like shield it. But yeah, and it was being done to all the women, all the girls around me. So it wasn't just me, it was a knowing. And that verse is from the Bible, like, it's better to be, the moat scenario, whatever. I don't know what verse it is from our book, but yeah, it's a biblical statement.
And would you say that, so it sounds like it was church, it sounds like it was more religious. Would you say there was, obviously it sounds like there was dogma, but would you say there was also like something called brainwashing, which a lot of people claim happens within cults?
Yeah, of course. If you're scared to leave the church because you think something bad is going to happen to you, or you're told to listen to what the pastor says and don't ask questions, like that, the whole time growing up, I would be like, Mama, what about this? Like, it doesn't make sense that our church is the only right one, because what about like kids in the Middle East? And I asked for this as a young child. I'm like, they don't know about Jesus. Like, they have a different language, they have a different, religion and perspective, but they're innocent kids. It doesn't make sense, because they don't know about Jesus, that God would send them to hell. Like that. And then she would kind of be like, well, you have to leave those things to God. So my mom had a level of level-headedness about her, but the church's perspective was like, in this church, you're served life on a golden platter, to realize how blessed you are to be here. Don't question it, just submit. The pastor is the shepherd, you're the flock. It was very much so about being a submissive servant to the church's way of doing things. And even to this day, like, many people are leaving because they've started to question things, and they're like, wait, this is not right. And as they question it, they get pushed back, and either they submit to it or they leave.
So really it was like you were having to give your will away, like your power away, and so you're being very disempowered and having to be submissive to the pastor, it sounds like. Yeah,
for sure. And you didn't ask questions, you just do what you're told, be seen and not heard. That's what I was told.
So you didn't, do you feel like you had choice?
If the only choice you're allowed is the choice that you participate in yourself. So like, I wasn't allowed to watch movies, but my next door neighbor had a library in his house, and he traveled a lot, and I had access to their family home. So sometimes I would go over to their house and go into the library and pull out movies, and it was like The Little Rascals and such, and I would take them home and turn them on and start watching them in the VHS or DVD player. And then of course Mama would be like, that's not right, like, take them back. Not because I took movies out of the neighbor's house, but I wasn't supposed to be watching anything outside of, well, there was nothing. I could watch Smithsonian and National Geographic, which was actually, I'm thankful for, that's what I grew up watching. But there was just this control mechanism around it. It was like nothing, no roller skating rings, I had choice. Like, I was able to go and get the movie, but I had to do it in hiding. And then lots of people dealt with immense amount of guilt and shame, because they would feel like, oh, well, I think it's okay to trim my hair, or I think it's okay to watch a movie, it's not a bad movie. So they'd have to do it where people wouldn't see, and then if someone from the church saw, they would get judged and like pushed out, and now you need to go to the altar and repent, and like, it was a lot of guilt. I remember one person, you're not supposed to curse, and he would like exhale and hear curse words, and he was just like in this, it kind of caused him to be a little bit psychotic. Yeah, like causing people to go a little bit mentally ill. And speaking of suppression, I think that's where the sexual energy comes in, because the women were not supported in feeling empowered or beautiful, so they were suppressing their sexual energy. So were they showing up fully for their husbands? I would say 95% of the time not, to like actually show up and be in a healthy romantic relationship, because it was suppressed. And so then, because they felt guilty about it, they felt shamed of their sexual energy, so they didn't express it with their partners. Their partners weren't having intimate connection like natural healthy humans would desire. And so then they would, project it onto other people. So it was like this rat race, like this, it was contained. It was contained, but it was contained through guilt and shame, which is not a healthy way of harnessing one's energy.
So it sounds like the people who were inside in this church were very controlled, were indoctrinated with a lot of fear, shame, guilt, suppression, disempowerment, and would you say that kind of captures the essence of the negative aspects of a cult?
Definitely.
Were there any positives other than a few virtuous concepts that were taught?
Just growing up in a family environment and that being emphasized. I love having all my brothers and sisters and dinner around the table every night, but I don't think that has anything to do with the church. I think that's just living in the South, and it's big families and it's what you do, and neighborhood kids come and knock on the door, and you pull up a chair and everyone's fed and taken care of and you work together. But I think that's just more of a lifestyle, not connected to the religion aspect.
Okay. So now let's come to the topic of how you broke free from this. What happened that made you then want to get away, and like you knew you had to do something to get out?
Yeah, so my father crossed over when I was 19, and him leaving, his physical body and leaving, he was really the anchor for me, the person who actually honored me through that whole process. He gave me a book, Black Cats and Quantum Bodies, I think it was, when I was a kid, and it was a quantum physics book, and he started, giving me access to thinking that was outside of the box. And he was very much so not really into the church. He supported my mother, who was into the church. He was more so out of the box. More of an expanded consciousness and what he thought about, the books he read, his philosophy and so forth. So he couldn't really talk to people in the community because he kind of lived in a much more expanded level of awareness. Anyhow, he really held space for me as a child to like make the most of it and kept me on like a mental healthy path in place to get through all of it. As soon as he crossed over, I was like, okay, this is my opportunity to leave. Like, I don't have anything here now that he's gone. And I felt like I needed to stay and hold space for my mother for a couple months. And I remember, being at home with her and going back to the church. At the time, I guess I was 18. And I went to the church, I went to the altar, I did everything they wanted me to do, and I gave it like one last try. And people came up to me after and they hugged me, but they just looked at me with like kind of like almost like a disdain, or like almost like they were exhausted, like they were a hamster on a wheel, and they weren't going anywhere. And here I was, kind of stepping away from the church, and then I decided to step back in, and there was no genuine happiness for me stepping back onto the path with them. And I could see that what they were experiencing from the path was not real joy. And I would read my Bible every day, I would pray, I would do what I was told to do, and I was still like an outcast. Like, they never fully embraced me or accepted me. And I realized, like, okay, yep, this is how it's gonna be. Like, I wasn't enough for them as a kid. It doesn't matter what I do, it's never gonna be enough for them. And at that point it was like, okay, I have to go. So I bought a plane ticket to California. Yeah, and that's where.
So you knew that you had to get out, and you ran for it basically. You were 18, you said?
Yeah.
So for your first 18...
Or 18, 19. So that was in November of 2009. So I turned 19, I think, in 2000, yeah.
Okay.
June of 2019, yeah.
So for your first 19 years of life, basically, you grew up in this cult.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was a lot of indoctrination that came in. There was a lot of programming, a lot of shame, guilt, fears, all of these, right? So for 19 years of your early years and programming, so how did you break out of that? Once you got on a plane and went to California, like, how did you unwind all of that? What was that process like for you?
Yeah, it's a good question. So thankfully, my father taught me a lot, or shared a lot of wisdom. He would say, if you're going to do something, do it right the first time, show up fully. You can't lean and work, like really show up for life and take advantage of opportunities, put yourself out there, like give it your best. And so I was just this girl from a small town, Alabama, land in California. I was doing ocean photography. I worked in a mechanic shop for a little bit. Like a guy was like, oh, I was like, can I just volunteer here? And he would be like, yeah. I was like, what? You're this white woman. It was in Southern California. And he's like, what? Like, can you really fix anything? And I'm like, yeah, of course I can. And I'm like, I'll just volunteer. So he's like, okay, fix this. And I fixed it. And he's like, you just fixed that? He's like, I have all these guys who've worked for years and they couldn't fix that. And he's like, now fix this. Because thankfully my dad had me working with him on trucks and just like, for play. And so anyhow, I just showed up and did a lot of different work and developed my skills. And I eventually worked my way to what would be considered the top. I was living in a beautiful home in Marina Del Rey and working as like a governess or manager for this royal family from Nigeria. And I was dating at some point an NBA basketball player. And I was at what they would call the top. And, like these fancy cars and this and that, whatever. And I remember standing in my condo overlooking the ocean and feeling this like, I'm here. And I felt so empty inside, and I screamed out to God, and I was having visions of like taking my life because I'm like, this is it, I've reached it and this is it. Like I thought I would feel joy inside. No. So I screamed out and I said, God, something's gotta give, like so loud. And next thing I know, it was like bam, bam, bam. My job, my boyfriend just like disappeared, like one thing after the other, just closed door, closed door, closed door. And I found myself in San Diego, and I recall having a psychedelic experience actually with mushrooms that started answering questions and reprogramming through the plant consciousness or Gaia consciousness through the fungi. Like I started having awareness around like what the church called certain things, like universal consciousness has another term for it that was not limiting or constricting the process, but actually empowering. And I asked the shroom consciousness, like I was feel very sick. And as I was coming back to my natural consciousness, I was like, now how do I get to this level of awareness all the time? And she said, now you have to get here naturally. And I was like, oh, okay. So shortly after that, I was in Balboa Park, and I started to I was just laying on the ground, it was on Earth Day, and I'm laying on the grass, and I felt my soul start kind of rising above my body, and some type of veil just lifted, and I know in that moment it was like I woke up. I could literally feel myself wake up, and someone was around me and they were playing these chimes, and another person was playing the didgeridoo, and that was a moment within me, I know that's the day I woke up. Earth Day of 2010. So from there, I started eating organic food and practicing yoga, and I got all my fancy dresses and fake jewelry, stuff that was just based on the ego, and I put it in a box and I donated it, and then I went to a thrift store and bought, other clothing that just didn't have that egotistical. I needed to detox, in other words. I needed to detox my attachment to the ego. So I went through that process, and then at some point, I started having energy come out of my hands, and I realized that I was clairvoyant. I realized there was a term for being able to see energy. And I would say, if it was starting to get so strong, and I'm like, I need to learn how to harness this energy. And as I was getting older now, 19, 20, and I'm like, I need to figure out how to work with this. And I kept saying, if Harry Potter has a school, there has to be one for me too. And I'm like, I have to know. And all my girlfriends or sisters were worried about me because I'm on YouTube searching auras and energy and how do I learn about this stuff. And they were worried that I was going to come turn into some witch person and go all woo woo. But I felt this intense calling, I know there's a school for me, there just has to be. So eventually I came into contact with a wizard, I would say. He very much looked like a wizard. And I said to him too, there has to be, some type of training for me with energy. And he yeah, he had all kind of like a library and alchemy space and so forth. Finally, after I would say like 2 months or whatnot of saying this to him, becoming friends with him, he said, okay, there is a mystery school, and one of the high priestesses live here in Los Angeles, and that was Goddess Teresa. So I contacted you, and I remember I did not have the money to attend Empower Thyself, and I was so determined to go. And I had maybe a couple $100 that I could put to it, but I was like, I have to figure this out. And I was so determined that like people around me knew that it was really important for me, and they saw that I needed this redirection of my life. And so the money, people were just like, here, like, go do this, you need this. So yes, I got initiated, and from that point on, I remember being in Empower Thyself class and almost like shaking and like feeling almost like layers and layers and layers of energy coming off of me, and all of these like almost like bells ringing in my head, in the sense of like gears connecting, like all of the truth that I knew deep down inside of me as a child that I was not allowed to express or talk about or really communicate with anyone about, was like being brought to me and reflected back to me from another person. So it's like what my inner truth was, you were saying it back to me. I'm like, oh my gosh, like you get it. Like you were saying, you were speaking my truth, and it was in a very grounded way. So that's where it began almost 10 years ago.
Okay, so as you came into the mystery school, the modern mystery school, how would you say some of the experiences were was any of it similar, or was it different from what you experienced with the church growing up?
Yeah, I would have to say totally different. The only thing that was similar was that there was a community of people, but the people in the mystery school or the modern mystery school that I was interacting with were thinking thoughts and had philosophy and ways of operating that was based in empowerment and not victimhood or like suppressed mentality. The philosophy I started receiving, you know, in the different courses, that the prerequisites is what we refer to them as, it was just adding on layers and layers of awareness and truth that I always knew existed, and it was like, just here it is, and I'm like, yes, like, and then actually show me how to work with it and use it in a way that's not just knowledge, but I could actually apply it to my reality and use it on a daily basis, like through sacred geometries and things like that. So I just started gaining more and more tools. I think the biggest thing for me is I was very empathic. So having the rituals allowed me to like start setting my own field so that I didn't have to take on other people's energy. So I could start knowing where I was and where they began. And I could start setting this boundary. And over time of using those rituals, it's only gotten clearer and stronger. Yeah.
Now, when some people hear rituals, you know, ooh, it's, you know, it's black magic, or it's voodoo, or, you know, like, what would you define, like, when we talk about rituals, what are they? Like, what do we mean by that?
Okay, so from my personal experience, I can wake up in the day, I don't have to do my rituals. I have my emails, I have my business, I have my clients, I need to go start doing my work, right? But I know over the past 9 years, this has proven itself time and time again. If I wake up and go directly into doing my rituals, do my meditation, my Qigong, my practices, like what I feel called to practice that day, and in general, it includes my basic rituals that I got in Empower Thyself, and then over years I've adapted more and started expanding my energy with those practices. It's like as I bring, it's literally like stepping up to the face of God consciousness and like pulling it through my body, through my system, and literally I feel myself like start being elevated, and I find myself go like, oh yes, I'm back, like I'm in it. And it's a thing that, you know, practicing rituals is something we tune into every day because we're in this dimension. There's all these other kind of wild and lower frequency energies coming at us. So it's like the rituals allow us to consciously choose to elevate ourselves to a level of God consciousness that's accessible in this dimension, on this earthly plane that we live in our society. So it's like, it's a channel of, almost like a tunnel of clarity that I get to tune into. And then I finish my rituals and I make my calls, and I have a 2-year-old daughter, and, you know, I take care and I align and the rest of my day flows 100% better. It flows more like in a magical way. If I don't do my rituals until like 2 or 3 in the afternoon or something, it's like I'm human until 2 or 3. And then I do my rituals and it's like my wings come out.
Yeah.
It's magic. You just have to try it. You won't know unless you do them.
Yeah. So maybe we can describe them as energetic practices, spiritual practices that where we're learning how to actively call in and harness various forces of creation from the spiritual realms, from the universe around us, to help flow and direct those in our lives, whether for protection or for manifestation or for just supporting us with whatever it is we need, right?
Yeah.
But they're ritualistic in the sense that we do them on a daily basis. They're regular, and yet they're a tool that we are given to give us a direct link to our connection to the divine versus having to go through a mediator like a priest or something.
Or a pastor, right? Yeah, exactly.
Okay, good.
It's direct connection, yeah.
So they're tools for empowerment.
Yeah, totally.
And they help us to really strengthen our will. So did you find, I mean, obviously you had to have had already, even though your upbringing really kind of tried to suppress your will and get you to give your power away to, you know, the church or the pastor or whatnot, you seem to have a strong enough will to be able to break away and to choose something different for yourself. And then to go at like 19 years old and to go off to California from, you know, the South and just like, here I am, help me universe, and make it on your own, right? And by the time you found your way to the mystery school and came into the Empower Thyself class with me, you were what, 21?
Yeah.
So maybe 2 years on your own?
Yeah.
And I remember from, you know, what you were talking about during Empower Thyself, you started feeling all this energy coming through and you didn't really know what to do with it. And it was overwhelming. Would you say that yeah. So what did you, like, when you were going through that experience of your awakening, right? So you self-initiated when you said something's got to give, God. And then you started actively seeking your own spiritual development. So that's something that we call self-initiation. So you were really realizing that this is important in your life. This is a priority.
It was life or death for me.
And so you started to really grow and improve and educate yourself into these matters. You started to awaken, and you started seeing energy, but you didn't really have the tools or the knowledge of how to deal with it. Is that a correct assessment?
Yeah.
So then you came to the mystery school, and how did you find that these tools and these teachings really helped you to integrate and to know what to do with what you were experiencing?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I'd have to say the main key is now I have discernment and I have a way to like hold off my field, because a lot of the input I was getting was from other people. So it allowed me to understand, like, you're picking up on other people's thoughts or their feelings and what they're processing. It's not yours. So I could activate my Kabbalistic cross and clear it. And then from that place, be in my own energy and actually feel a sense of peace. And I feel like being able to discern, like, what is me and what is somebody else, it's just that ability to make an accurate calculation of something and then follow through with it and act upon that assumption or that awareness, and it actually bear fruit, positive fruit, showed me that the like mediation within my discernment that was happening after becoming initiate was accurate. That makes sense. Because I started having, I could pick up on my higher self speaking to me, and then maybe I would hear something else and it's like, wait, that sounds right, but it's more cyclical. It's doing like this, like that's not coming from my higher self. Like when my higher self speaks to me, it's more like, okay, like that. And it's not coming from a reaction place. It's more coming from like a level-headed place, like reason and like balance.
So you got some tools that support you with clarity, with discernment, with having more balance in life. Did you feel like they were really grounded, or were they kind of out there?
No, totally grounded, because that was an issue I had, and we used to say to me too, like, you have to get grounded a lot. You have to get grounded. I was like a complete fairy, and 9-day difference from where I was 9 years ago today. And part of it is just getting older, maturity, But if I would have stayed where I was at that point, or went on, I feel like, the natural path of a 20-year-old, I would not be where I am today. And so I'm so glad that I stepped onto the path of mystery school, had people holding a level of energy for me to look to for like inspiration of like, okay, it is possible to embody my innate regality and my individual godhood in this dimension. I don't have to get carried away on drugs. I don't have to be like thinking I'm gonna find it in a club or what have you. It's like, I tried it a little bit. I remember like drinking for like 1 month and I'm like, this is lame. Like, this is not, I don't wanna be, I look at the people around me, I'm like, I don't wanna be these people. When I'm in school and I look at the people around me and I look at their devotion to the light and supporting other people and being empowered so that other people can create the lives they really want to experience, like that inspires me. Those are the people I want to be like, and they're doing it. And they're driving cars and they own homes and they run businesses and they're doctors and they're veterinarians and they're entrepreneurs and they're doing things, they're creators, they're doing what they love. And yet they're holding a beautiful light and they have a sense of joy inside of them, and it comes from giving. And I see it and it inspires me to be that, Yeah.
And so with the mystery school work, it's, you got a lot of tools, there's a structure to it, right?
Yeah, totally.
There's a path of progression, or step by step, kind of like if you go to a university, you have certain level of entry classes and then intermediate classes and then advanced classes, and you work your way through it to getting a degree. Maybe some people choose to go on from there and go live their career doing something else. Other people choose to keep going and go from like a bachelor's degree to a master's to a PhD to then even becoming teachers of it, right? So it's kind of like a university for our soul's development, not just for kind of education within the matrix.
Totally. And I've had the thought many times. Now I'm a psychostope ritual master, and I have been trying to go to a higher level of training for probably like 5 years now. And it doesn't matter if you show up and you're like, oh, I want to pay, initiate me. No, I could have all the money in the world and present it. And if my energy body is not to where it needs to be in order to hold that level of frequency, I can't move forward in the school in that way. So as I have progressed, I've thought so many times over, whoa, like when I attend a next level of training or another class, the international or the headquarters in our classes, I'm like, this is why I couldn't be here 2 years ago when I first applied to, attend this class, because I wasn't ready. And I would think in my head like, oh, I can handle it. I'm ready. Like I'm connected. But I wasn't. It's very unique information, and the information comes with an energy, and when that energy is embraced, there's a reaction or like a response or a creation from embracing that energy. And it's ideal to embrace energy when it can actually be integrated, I would say. And up until now, until this point, I wasn't ready for my next levels of training.
So it's kind of like you really have to earn your way towards those advancements by integrating the tools and the energy into your life versus just buying your way.
Yeah, you can't buy your way through. No. And the teachers have all been very, like Ipsissimus Dave, for example, and Goddess Franca, his wife, and so forth, they've been very compassionate. Like all of the leaders in the school that I've connected with, it's been, and even going to Japan and working with Founder Goodney and such, and having a session with him and his wife being there and so forth, and my partner, it was just immense love in a very grounded way. And it's like I knew they had knowledge and wisdom that I wanted to tap into. I wasn't quite ready yet, but it's like in my process, they're just compassionate. It's like, how can we support you? And then it's up to me to apply the tools that I've already tapped into and the knowledge and so forth. And then it's like, okay, when you're ready, we're here for more. And if I don't want to go back, I don't have to keep going to class. But every time I go to class, I learn more, I apply it, and I grow. So I'm like, flippin' A. Like, I don't see anywhere else in the world that's offering what the Modern Mystery School is offering. That's why I keep showing up. So like, I've lived in New York, worked in fashion photography and all kind of arenas. And it's like, I've tried it, and nothing actually like satisfies. No work that I've tapped into, no field of, expertise and so forth, like fulfills on a deeper level, then yeah. But what I've tapped into the school has, so I keep going to class. Yeah.
Now, some people out there who have like claimed, oh, you know, they force you or they pressure you to spend more money to take that next class, to move forward, and you know, versus people having their own choice around it. What would you say that you've ever felt that pressure to spend more money, to, you know, take that next step? I mean, you just said you've been 5 years kind of
yeah. No, it's more like if you want to go, you have to go out of your way. You have to apply, it's like a whole process. I mean, like if you're going to a university, you can't just be like, okay, professor, I want to take your class for free. And it's like, okay, well maybe like, no, wait a second. Do you have these prereqs? Like you have to either have a scholarship, which means someone's paying for it. Like there has to be some type of energy exchange for the course, and you have to really want it. Otherwise, you're not going to retain the information and you're not going to pass the exams. And if you don't pass the exams, we can't move you forward. So it's like you actually have to really want to study with a mystery school in order to keep studying for it. And maybe sometimes people kind of want it, but then they don't actually want to put in the effort that it takes to like integrate that level of knowledge and like clarity, because it's a lot of accountability. And so instead of embracing it, they just project or say, it's their fault, and they just kind of shrink into the shadows and disappear. You don't have to do that. If you don't want to keep studying at the university, you just be like, okay, I've decided a different career path. And you always have those, you know, if you went and got your master's in something or a bachelor's in something, you always have that there. It doesn't mean you can't go study somewhere else in another college and get a degree in another area. That's fine, you know, it's always there for you. But there's nothing forcing you to go forward except for your own internal guidance. And whether or not you want to listen to that at this time or listen to it 10 years from now, what have you. But it's like just bail or step out of the university without like projecting on people who are actually enjoying the classes and growing from it and gaining good from it, I would say.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah.
You know, when I was at the university, it was like, to get like a PhD, for example, you can't just buy your way through. You have to take a lot of courses. You have to pass a lot of tests. It's grueling homework. You know, you have to integrate. You have to prove that you know it. You have to then do your research. You have to do something novel. You have to earn your way. And there's no entitlement to that degree. And it's very similar, I have found, within the mystery school. It's different in the sense that it's more spiritual. And so some people think, well, they shouldn't be charging because it's spiritual. But I find that it's an education for the soul. Totally. It's just as deep, it's just as profound. And actually, personally, I learned more and retained more and used the tools and the knowledge I've learned more from the mystery school than anything I learned in my education. You know, and I went all the way to getting a PhD in physics. So the things and every little dime, every penny that I spent on my mystery school education has produced 10,000 times more value in my life than what I spent getting my PhD in physics. So, you know, I see it very much as like a university, but it's a university for the soul. And yet when we invest in ourselves, it's us valuing our growth at an internal level, not just valuing this degree so that I can get this career job or whatever and hopefully then make money, but then you end up becoming a hamster in the wheel of the rat race.
Yeah, so a good analogy for this would be like, okay, you have the college degree and you have this really epic job. It's high paying, 401k, you got everything set up. But then you show up, first day of the job, and your coworkers trigger you. And you're used to just blowing off because you don't get your way, or you blow up. Or you're like, oh my gosh, I feel like they're talking about me. All of this internal stuff starts coming up, and it's like, why do I not feel joy? Why am I feeling depressed? Why am I feeling lethargic? Like, you know, I have the most perfect job. I worked for it. I earned my way here. So the point is, if it's off energetically, or if someone's soul is not tapped in and connected to their higher self, it doesn't matter how great your degree is and how great your job is and how much money you make. If the energy body, if the soul is off, you can't really enjoy your professional degree. So it's like you need a degree, advanced degree in both arenas, if you want to put it that way, so that you can actually enjoy your physical job, enjoy your physical success, and internally feel immense amount of joy while you're doing it. Like, that's being a whole, WHOLE, human being and like really living life to its fullest in the way that we're meant to live life, I would say.
Yeah, so creating that balance between physical and spiritual, which is
and investing in both.
Right.
Super
and that's
important.
something we really emphasize in the mystery school, is that we're not here just to be spiritual beings and go live off in the monastery or up on the mountaintop. Like, we're here to live in the world and not necessarily be of the world, like be in the, caught up in the human game, but to be contributing members to society, to live in the world and yet also live our spiritual practice and let this world be our testing ground for our awakening.
Yeah.
Right? It's easy to be enlightened when you're off in the monastery. You don't have to deal with all the crap of the world out there. But when you're in it, it's a real testing ground. So it's very practical, it's very applied. And we are immersed in society. We're not withdrawn from society.
Yeah, totally.
So that's a pretty big distinction there also from what a lot of cults are. They're insular, they're isolating people from society. We're exposed. We're out there for everyone to see. We're on Facebook and on the internet and on social media and so forth all the time. Whereas what you grew up with, you couldn't even watch a movie.
No, we
you
were
couldn't
told
watch the news.
Or it might influence us and then make us leave the church, which would then send us to hell. So there was it's like, okay, if the tools they were giving us and the philosophy they were sharing with us really worked, then we should have been able to be around other people who had a different opinion and perspective, and we still be able to hear them out and still feel rooted in our own truth in the tools that they share with us. But it wasn't that way. It was like, avoid those people with different perspective and just stay over here and only listen to us, because if you start, they'll make you question yourself. When you question yourself, then you deceive yourself. And if you deceive yourself, well, then you're done with. So,
and since you've been in the mystery school, have you ever had anyone question you and your beliefs and what you're doing?
100%. And one of the main things I have been told is to question it. All the teachers say, don't take my word for it. Question it. Go do your own research. Look into it. Try it out. Work with it. Like, question yourself. You have to. Otherwise, how are we supposed to grow if we don't allow for there to be a sense of polarity and dynamic? It's like, okay, wait, this feels more in alignment than this. And, it's this teetering act and elevation.
And rather than it being dogma and you have to believe me because this is just how it is and this is the doctrine and this is what we say, it's like, here, why don't you go test it and see what results it creates in your life, right?
Totally.
You need to discover this for yourself, and if it, it's worked for me, here's how we do it. Why don't you go try and see if it works for you? And then by your own results, by your own fruits, we come to own this, right? We come to own it in our life. And so then when somebody comes to us and says, oh, you're part of a cult, or how could you believe that, or I don't agree with you, or we challenge, they cause us to potentially doubt. How do you feel like it's different within you to be able to face that?
Well, for one, I feel a sense of compassion. The only way someone could see the light coming from a group of people and positivity coming from their life work and call it delusion or project negativity upon it is if they have next to no connection to the light within them. So honestly, it's like, whoa, like they have to be really like either shut off to energy and awareness in order to be able to justify projecting on something that's in the light in the way that they are. So first, I feel compassion for them. And two, I know the light's always gonna win. So it's like, well, bless them, and all I can go by is my experience and the hundreds of people I'm in community with around the world and what they're experiencing in their life too. It's like, yo, instead of like knock it, why don't you just test it out and like just do it and you'll see. Right. It's like that, yeah.
So versus instead of having just an opinion or a judgment on it based on somebody else's opinion or based on your own fear of what it might be, it's like test it and see for yourself.
Yeah, totally.
Give it a try, and then by the fruits you shall know.
Yeah.
Or by your own direct results, and I think that's a very scientific way of going about our spiritual development. It's not about dogma. It's about hey, this, if it's true, it should create positive results in your life. Totally. And then by our own results, we know versus just believe.
Yeah.
Right? Or versus just having faith. Like we know, because that was my experience.
Yeah, exactly.
And I have the results and the proof to show that this worked, right, in my own life. Like we become the living proof of these teachings.
Yeah, totally.
So let me ask you this. I have a couple other questions that I want to cover before we're done. So one, how would you describe what you've learned from the mystery school being different from what you experienced with your studies that were maybe a little more new age or kind of urban shamanism?
Yeah, because I did tinker around conscious community and so forth and tried psychedelics and such prior to tapping with mystery school when I first started my spiritual practice. I would say there were aspects of it that were positive, but the new age field, the aspects of it that were true, which was, communing with the plants and so forth, they made it very clear to me, like, if you want to get out of this cycle of death and rebirth and like self-sabotaging yourself, you have to stop the plant medicines. It's like at that point, if I would have kept using them, I would have been abusing them. And at that point, what I've seen happen to many people is they end up kind of going a little cuckoo and some screws come unloose. And for me, I would say that in my earlier years, I wasn't so ungrounded, and actually doing plant medicines made me super ungrounded, where it was difficult to like hold a job or, these type of things. It's kind of embarrassing to say, but it was very illusionary. It was like, oh, I'm more tapped into God. Like I feel more connected when I'm on the, if I have some marijuana or something, and then I would sober up and then I was left empty. But everyone in the New Age movement, it's what they were doing. It's like, let's smoke and go do yoga, or let's do this and and it was like the only time we felt good or even liked hanging out with each other was when we were high. And I think about it, like, I don't really remember what we did for like that period of time that we had these substances in our field. And it's like, that's not real connection. That's not real friendship. Now, after going through that, and what I love about the mystery school is it's like, especially as you go further on, like we're encouraged to not have substances in our field. And I love that because I can hang out with my mystery school folks. And it's like on Sunday night, we're all getting together here in Los Angeles. And it's like, no one's gonna be high. No one's gonna be drunk. We're gonna be authentically connecting, showing up like one human being to another. Not just through our cell phones, texting each other on Instagram, or not through, some hallucinogenic or something, but it's like authentic connection. So that's an aspect I love about my fellow students in the Modern Mystery School, is that we show up to connect with each other in a sober way. Whereas in the New Age movement, that community, we were never actually connecting. In the philosophies were all like, there wasn't real philosophy. It was like, oh, everything's perfect, everything's in the light. And it's like, well, at some point, yeah, everything, like there's a light, and then it comes through our human consciousness and it gets distorted based upon our programming. So when people would just kind of like pull out and be like, oh, it's all love and light, it's like that horrible thing happening to that person over there is not from the light. Like God consciousness does not want that to be happening right now. That human who's doing it to the other human needs to harness themselves, say no to the energy, the negative ego, the evil, if you want to call it, influencing them, and stop doing it. And then, and maybe someone else needs to stop in and make them stop doing it too. Like, we have to say no to evil. We have to stand up and be the light in situations. And that statement right there was not being reflected to me in the New Age community. Whereas in the mystery school, it's like you have to say no to evil. It's that simple. Like if it doesn't resonate and it's hurting another being, don't go along with it. Like set your boundaries. And maybe it's not just like that explicit, but like what I take from it for myself is like to be the light and be a person who stands up with integrity for what's right, period. And like my friends know that, like you're so good at saying no to darkness, and like when people want to come in with like negative energy and negative vibes, it's like, it's not gonna be here. Like in this space, it's gonna be good. It's gonna be like clean and like vibing and just like beautiful energy. That's the only thing that's gonna be in this space, and that's it. So like we're trained to like have the tools to set those boundaries to create beauty. It's that simple. Whereas in the New Age movement, it was just, everything was just, ugh. Some moments were beautiful, and then it would be equally as like dark and chaotic and evil, and people start blowing up and fighting, and the next moment it's like love, and the next. In the school, it's not like that. It's like this equilibrium, you know? It's like it's not one extreme to the next. You told me that years ago. Like, you want to be like a pendulum. Like, you're like, currently you're swinging like way out in joy and way out in depression. You're like, you want to get it right there in the center and kind of like
small swings.
Yeah. So thankfully she told me that, and I've embodied it and will continue to.
Yeah, so we talk about in the mystery school, it's about the path of balance, or you know, they also talk about it's the middle way, right? In the Eastern traditions, they say it's the middle path, the middle way, where it's about harmony, it's about beauty, it's that middle pillar in the Kabbalistic tree of life, where there's always this dynamic of back and forth, but we try to, you know, instead of swinging high and low, we try to find the place where everything can really come into that sweet spot of balance, and it's sustainable and it's stable and it's you know, and yet there's a powerful ability to create there because you're not swinging so much and creating that chaos in life.
Yeah, exactly. It's all really in that sweet spot. Imagine it's like everything, it's just pure ingredients. Otherwise, if you're pulling ingredients from out here, it's like extreme in this way and extreme that way. You can't really create anything like a stable foundation from all those extreme differences. But if you can bring them together and like purify it, and then you have this pure like heart-centered energy in the center, and then you pull out your ingredients from that, and then you build your foundation, it's going to be like solid, and then you can live life from there. It's just the best place to create life from. And that's like the modern mystery school specifically. Out of all the 7 mystery schools, the modern mystery school is rooted in heart chakra energy, or heart energy, and that energy, the essence of it is beauty. So it's like coming into your heart and then taking the ingredients and creating a beautiful life. And anyone who's willing to put in the work, they have direct access to it. It's beautiful. It just comes through and boom, you create it, you share it.
Nice, well said.
Yeah.
So here's another question. So as you were in the mystery school, and I noticed this a couple times earlier on in your path, that, you know, when you went to Healers Academy and then when you to Healers 2, and you were taking next steps of initiation beyond the first step of Adept or Empower Thyself, sometimes you hit, you know, the light would come in and it would hit stuff within you, and you know, it would cause an inner, you know, a little bit of inner turmoil that would come up. And I know that you had some of the fears from your programming when you were in that cult, as you know, growing up, and some of those fears would get triggered and come up and be projected onto the mystery school. So how can you just share a little bit about that, and how ultimately you worked your way through that to realize that it was not a cult? Like, how would you describe the mystery school as different from, you know, what your experience of a cult is?
Yeah. So, let me feel into this one. I don't exactly know how to answer that one.
So would you say that, as you know, when the light came in, and you know, the energy was like what I have observed often in some of these initiation programs, is that the energy comes in and it illuminates parts within our subconscious that we haven't yet dealt with, and as those parts get illuminated, they, you know, the energies, the emotion,
it brings
the thoughts,
up all the
it brings
clutter.
it up to the surface,
yeah, exactly.
right? And then we're, you know, kind of in the mix of it. And until we recognize it as, oh, this is my old pain or my old wounding or my old indoctrination, it's very easy to project it out. And put that on the teacher, put that on the school, put that on other people. So how did you work your way through that?
Well, I mean, probably something came up the first time and you were probably like, well, it sounds like this is connected to things that you experienced in your youth. And then I would be like, oh, flipping A, it is. And it would come up. And then, so from there forward, when it would come up, maybe it would take me a couple days or a week or something. Or sometimes it was probably just mere laziness of not wanting to acknowledge what was coming up in me. And I knew it was leaving my field. And I didn't necessarily want it to go, because it was a level of like, I could hide behind it. I could, you know, victimhood is like, it's a very justifying mentality. It's like, well, that happened to me. And you're saying that I have to let that go and move on. And it's like, well, that gives me the right to, you know, get a freebie here. And, you know, energetically, it gets me attention over here and so forth. So I don't know that I want to let it go. And when the light would come in from, not even from anyone saying anything, but just being in classes and such, it's like a light would get shined on it, even through someone else's experience. yeah, and it's like the light's coming through, and it would hit the gunk, and kind of like, I would say, it cracked me. It would crack me open, and then what was in there would start surfacing. And it's like, I at some point realized, like, okay, like, in order to move on the other side of this, so like I have attachment to this, but the feeling it brings is horrible. So if I want to get past the suffering and past that horrible feeling that occurs occasionally, like, I have to let this go. So it's like the light would come in and cause these cracks, and the stuff would gurgle up, and then it's like, okay, like, before it can leave me, it's got to come out so it can go out, or come up so it can come, leave me. So it would come up, and I would feel it, and it would pretty much make me sick on physical level, energetic level. But I knew pretty quickly, and I could see how it was connected to my programming and stuff that wasn't serving me, and I was just gonna have to feel it and let it process. And that's what I tell people who I work with today. It's like, yeah, it's the light coming in, and it's, before you can release it, it's got to come up, and you just gotta let it go, keep breathing through it,
Just kind of like growing pains.
Yeah, exactly. But on the other side, once it detoxes out of the system, it's like, whew, man, like, I don't know how I carried that around so long, or like, that thought process is now gone, or I don't have to deal with that anymore, I don't have to feel that way anymore. It's like, it's actually worth going through it, release the attachment, and just let it leave the system. If it takes a day, if it takes an hour, just let it go. Be like, I think if all humans had the prayer, whatever's in the will of my higher self, let it be in my life, and I'm willing to release whatever I have to release to be in alignment with who I authentically am and my greater good. If we all had that thought and like prayer and intention, it's like the world would be a very, very beautiful place. It's like, if it's not serving you, just let it go, Yeah.
And so do you feel like you were supported through that process as you were going through it?
Compassionately so, yeah. Always.
Good. And I mean, obviously you're still around, you're still in the schools. So, and I've watched your growth over the years, and, I've watched your evolution. You've become much more stable, much more grounded from, how you were when you first came in. You've been through the Kabbalah Ascension program. You've been through the King Solomon Healing Series,
Mind Region
series. So you've received healing sessions along the way as well to support you in integrating. And I have found sometimes that when people are on the path and they're good, there's a certain amount of self work that we do, such as through the Kabbalah program. But then there's other work where it's like we really do need to invest in our healing, because there's more core stuff that sometimes we can't see past our own blind spots. And by receiving those healing sessions, it helps us do more spiritual alchemy, but it kind of helps flush it out of the system in a more graceful way.
Totally.
Versus getting stuck in it. And yet there are people who come on to it's a choice, right? It's a choice that you have to pursue those sessions often. We might recommend it, but it's like you have to make that choice to do that. And not everybody does that. So sometimes they get stuck in their own attachment. And their own fears and projections, and then sometimes they leave the school, because they aren't ready to quite take that next investment in their own healing. So it takes dedication, right?
Totally. And I have a lot of experience around the healing modality. So I was living in New York City, and I was working with a practitioner named Yoko. She's from Japan, and she's one of the main guides there in New York City. And I live literally West Side Highway area in Chelsea, I think it was 4 or 5 blocks from her office. And I had been wanting to get the Mind Region series for 2 years. And I could have just walked 5 blocks over the whole time. I entered because I wasn't ready. And I guess some part of me knew that I wasn't yet ready to go through that level of healing and what was going to come up for me. That I couldn't have the sessions until finally I got pregnant with my daughter. And my higher self was like, okay, now it's time for you to do the Mind Region. And it just fell into place. And and I had all the sessions before I birthed Freya, and I feel like that was a final chapter of my maidenhood, things that I needed to clear and address before bringing her into the world so that I could show up more fully as a mother. And I'm doing great, and everyone in my community, I'm doing great at raising my child. And if you want to know where your trigger spots are, well, have a child. And I'm doing pretty good. And I highly credit it to the healing sessions that I've received through the school, because what I would experience, a lot of mine were with Yoko. And what I would experience is, it's like I would go into the session not even really knowing what it was, but then what would come up were things that I had totally forgotten or not even thought about. And there's two things. So I feel like when you go to see a psychiatrist, and you know, all of these different practitioners have their place in the medicine world and such, and healing world, but they oftentimes want you to recollect and bring it up and talk about it and cry about it and live through the trauma again. And flipping it, I've experienced some gnarly stuff, and I don't want to live through that again. But in these sessions with Yoko or the healing modalities of the Modern Mystery School, you don't have to talk about it. You don't, none of that. Like, they're a trained practitioner to work with your etheric field. So you go into the session and you're there, and they're literally able to see what is like there in your aura that I couldn't even see, and literally have different tools. And like, I could feel them, like her pulling it out of my field. Energetically, yeah. But I know it's like, it's wild. But when I would leave, all of a sudden that thought pattern, or this like way that my mind would automatically think that I didn't even realize that I was thinking, would all of a sudden not be thinking that way anymore. And when it was like being pulled out of my energetic field, I could like see the thought, and I'm like, holy goodness, like I have been operating in this mode, not even realizing it. And then also there were things, you know, from my youth growing up in the community that I was in, the cult that I was in, it's like I would forget stuff. And in these healing sessions, because it covers like inner child work and like all different levels of a human's consciousness, like what, as if the human brain is a computer, over years we have more and more, like we have different iOS uploads and different programs that are being put in the computer. And these healing modalities kind of file through the different programs and levels of iOS that our computer is running. And if there's any bugs in them, they go in and pull them out so that the mind can operate in a clear, sovereign way, like think in a healthy way. So yeah, I'm eternally grateful for the healing modalities, for sure.
So as those healings came in to help clear out those old thought patterns that didn't serve you, that were really blocking your fullness and your potential, your sovereignty, as you put it, you actually, once it was cleared out of your energetic field, you could see it for what it was.
Yeah, it was like, whoa, yeah, I didn't even know it was there, and I could finally see it.
So it went from subconscious to conscious, and then from that place you could make a choice about it.
Yeah, it was, she would say, are you ready to let this go? And it's like, flipping hey, yes, please get away from me. Like, it didn't even, yes, like, I'm done. Let it, take it out, please.
So it was always your choice ultimately.
Yeah, totally.
To let those go or not. Yeah, okay. Good.
Yeah, you have to consent, for sure. Otherwise, if you're like, oh, nope, I want to keep that, it's like she can pull away and leave it in the energy structure. Like, but no. When you see the stuff for what it is, you don't want it there.
Ultimately, what we teach in the Mystery School is that all healing is self-healing.
Yeah,
right?
totally.
So the healing practitioner can be there to facilitate and help flow the energy and administer and, you know, do the methods that we're taught. But ultimately, the client or the person who's receiving has to choose that healing. They have to be ready to heal themselves. And then they have to receive that energy that is prepared in the space for them. And that is our choice, right? Ultimately, all healing is self-healing. So it's very empowering again, because we are the ones who are healing ourselves versus it being somebody else who's healing us. Right?
Totally. And the energy exchange is a way of kind of making sure that the student or the client is at the place that, like, you know what, I'm really ready to heal. And yes, I'm ready to make this investment in myself. Otherwise, they're not going to do it, you know, because when that stuff starts to come up, if it's like, here, let me give you this healing, and it's like, well, can that really work? Because the person has to want to be healed, and stuff starts coming up, and it's like, wait, what do you do? No, I'm not ready. Ultimately, let that go, and then we just cut it off and pull away. But if someone's like, no, I really want this healing, and I'm willing to back up my word and my readiness with something of value, which could be money, which could be other services, any type of energy exchange that they agree upon, that's, you know, of the light, fine, let it be. Whatever works for them, great. Okay, the energy exchange is there. That's me saying, I really want this healing. Can you please hold space for me and share your expertise that you've cultivated? And so it is. Yeah, in the past, I had done a number of healings, either way discounted for people to make it more accessible to them, or for free sometimes, or as a gift. And I found in general that as much as I would give in and give to the energy session and the healing and give to them, when it came for free or when it came too easy, they didn't own it.
And then they sort of took it for granted, and
Totally.
then they didn't really, fully integrate it, and then, it wasn't sustaining in their life because they didn't actually invest themselves into it. So they weren't really ready to be empowered.
They weren't really saying yes to being healed.
They were saying, fix me.
Yeah, exactly. Right? But it's us healing ourselves. So,
yeah. Whereas when I've done, where has been energy exchange, equal energy exchange, whether that was through a monetary investment or an investment of exchange of services, which you and I have done a lot, there was always this, like, I really value this, so I'm going to really own this, and I'm going to show up and make the most of this, right?
Totally.
So it sustains and it really empowers. So this is why we charge, and it's not necessarily always about money. It's about balance of the energy exchange, equal energy exchange, so that there's empowerment versus enablement. Right?
Yeah, totally. And something I've seen time and time again, I'm not a guide in the Modern Mystery School. I'm a life activation practitioner and have been for about 7 years now. But I see, others who, like Teresa, who are serving so fully, and I've been in her life day in and day out. I've seen, her personal world for years. And I see these guys and I see their devotion to light and their devotion to holding space for other people to be in their fullest well-being, if I can say that. Like, they just want to see the people around them blossoming and growing, and they really devote their life to it. And that's what's unique about the Modern Mystery School, is you have practitioners who are doing the work that have other careers, have other professions, but for whatever reason, something like their calling is so strong, they feel so aligned with the path of being a guide and so much compassion that they devote themselves. And I'm, like I said, I'm not a guide yet, and I want to be a guide someday, but I see this compassion and devotion coming from people who are guides, and I'm like, whoa, like, it has ceased to amaze me. The love I see coming from them for other people. And it's like, what motivates them to wake up every day and go is the possibility of supporting other people and being empowered so that they can live the life they love, and so they can be in joy, and so they can stop suffering ultimately. Like, that's an amazing calling. It's not just like, oh, I'm going to be a guide today. Flippin' A, no. It's like, it has to call you from your higher self. And it's a major devotion to the path, that particular path of holding space for the people. So when you work with a practitioner or a guide in the Modern Mystery School, you're not just getting like a halfway thing. It's something they're actually devoted to. They actually want to see you heal. And then they're there for you when the light comes in and stuff starts coming up. It's like, you can send them an email, you can call them, you can meet with them face to face. You're like, hey, this is coming up. And it's like, okay, let's do etheric reconstruction. Let's go in that next level of the onion is peeling off. Let's take it out. And then it gets taken off. And it's like, whoa, if we were to try and process it on our own at that point, it could take like 2 months of like battling and trying to figure out what's up and what's down as it starts to process. But your guide is there with well-trained days and days, like extensive training, to hold space for you. Instead of it taking 2 months to process something, you can go in, get a cord cutting, get etheric reconstruction, whatever it may be, depending on the level of what you're dealing with, and you leave and it's done. Or it like cuts the processing time down to like this as opposed to this. So you just have to utilize your resources, and the guide is there to be like a main, person to like, hey, yo, help me out here. Okay, let's do this. Let's bump you up. All right, great. And then you can go into your community and like be that solid, healthy, balanced human being that everybody wants to be, that people on social media profess to be, but in reality, it's like, I'm gonna drop a backdrop and it's gonna be an ocean scene and people think I'm living in that, but in reality, I'm like in an apartment somewhere, like, maybe nothing wrong with apartments, but the point is like, you can really feel inside what you profess to be on the outside, and the guides are devoted to helping you embody that and be that. Yeah, that's what I have to say about that.
Well, I see an amazing guide in the making right now.
Okay, thanks.
When you feel ready for those next steps.
Thanks.
So my last question that I want to ask you is about your, as a woman in the mystery school, how do you feel treated as a woman?
Well, there are many, many, many queens in school. I would say every woman in there is a queen. And have you ever tried to misuse a queen? it won't go so well. So
can you define what you mean by a queen?
Yeah. Well, first off, to me, a queen is a woman who serves, she's solid within herself, she's abundant, she's overflowing energetically, and she has enough within her container to show up and give to the world around her to make it a better place. She's there to serve her queendom. She's there to, wherever she goes in her reality, whatever the dimensions of her reality are in that particular space, she shares beauty and goodness, and it's coming from just this overflowing cup of goodness. So, in the school, when women embrace this, the energy of the King Solomon lineage, it sparks something primal inside that is exquisite and rooted and real. And it's not based upon how many layers of makeup I have or what size my pants are. No, it's not based upon any of that. It's coming from like this well within them. And if you come at them with something that's not in alignment with integrity, you're gonna get called out. That's how it is. So I know myself and my sisters in the school, like we are held space for to be in our full regality, which is to know our power, own it, and share it with the world through an expression of grace. And if we want to be enthusiastic, or we want to be passionate, or we want to be like subtle, or however we want to be, whoever we authentically are, whether we're extroverted or introverted, it's like be that and be it to the fullest and be comfortable in that. Even if you're in a room and everyone around you is doing all these crazy things, if you feel led to just hold space and be there, just be that. If you feel led to engage, be that. Whatever you're doing, just fully show up as you authentically are. So that to me is a queen, a woman in her power. She's not embracing the projections, you should be this, you should look like that. She's just being herself, and she's bringing her gifts, whether it's song or it's whatever it is, even if it's just a beautiful smile or it's, quantum physics or knowledge and so forth. She's bringing it and she's sharing it, and she's having success from sharing it. Like that's what the school creates. The women who embrace this King Solomon lineage and the magic that's been held and is here available to us, it's like it brings out what our innate gifts are, and it gives us success in sharing them with the world. So like I have immense amount of tools and abilities that have developed in me since becoming an initiate. Like granted, my father instilled a lot of goodness and awareness in me, but since becoming an initiate, there's like a whole nother level of awareness to intricacies that I think allow me, if I'm in a lineup of candidates for a job position, I'm kind of plucked off the top. I've had two experiences. I've had you're overqualified, or it's like, oh yes, you want this position? Yes, please. And it's something for me, I see how when I step into this, it's gonna expand me and I'm gonna grow. Or if I work with this client, this is like a next level for me, I'm gonna grow. But they see me as like, whoa, in comparison to the masses, you're so, I can actually work with you. And this is an expert in the field. So it's like the lineage magic, when someone embraces it, it makes them almost like malleable to be able to show up and meet what they're being called to in the moment. So maybe they didn't know how to do X, Y, and Z, but it's almost like they can show up and say exactly what needs to be said, or do exactly what needs to be done, or they have the humility to ask for support in a way that then brings the team together. It's like they're, I don't know, an initiate who's embodying the energy and like loving the path and being in it. Like their lives just flow really beautifully, and it's almost like they're always at the right place at the right time, and it just happens seamlessly. So when it comes to women in the school, I see many, many empowered women just being goddesses, being just what I feel like we women were created to be, intended to be, what we came here to be.
So it's like we're encouraged to you be you, but
exactly.
You be your authentic self in your higher form, right?
Yeah.
So when you feel like you mentioned that there's lots of queens in the mystery school, and sometimes if you're kind of out of line, you'll get called out on it. Do you feel like that's coming from a place of bullying, or from a place of setting boundaries down, or from a place of holding you to, be rising up to more of your higher self?
Yeah, I think it depends on a level of action. Why I said that is because there's kind of a no BS policy in school. And it's not like, no BS. No, it's not like that. It's just like, you just know you better leave that stuff outside the door, because you have people showing up and they're clear. And when someone comes in with a lot of baggage and they're aware of it and they're trying to hide behind it, it gets called out. It's like a light shining on it. And you can feel it. It's like if you're in a really clean, spotless room and it's like, oh, the energy in here feels super, like you go into a very clean spa and it's very beautiful and the materials, and it's like, you feel like you can just, And then someone comes in with mud on their shoes and it's like really obvious that it's not appropriate to be wearing muddy shoes in this beautiful space. That's how it is in the school, I feel like, and amongst the students. It's like, you have mud on your shoes. Oh, I didn't know. And it's like, oh yeah, here, let me bring you some water and help clean it off. Great, we're happy to do that. But if someone wants to bring their mud into the school, we're like, no, we like having a clean, pure space to live life from. And we don't make space for that stuff to stick around. So either like clean it out and let it go and chill with us here, or if you want to keep on your dirty boots, then go outside. It's kind of like that. That's a good analogy or not.
All right. Yeah, so we're here to help people with that cleaning up process, right? It's not like we're just like, get your shit together before you come in the door. We're here to help you in that process, right? So long as
compassionately,
compassionately,
with grace.
So long as you're doing it, right?
As long as you want it clean.
If you keep coming again and again and again, tracking the mud, and at some point where you're like, okay, obviously you're not getting this.
Or if you like, we ask you to take off your shoes energetically, the muddy shoes, and you're like, no, I want to keep them on. It's like, well, you can't wear your muddy shoes inside of this container, this holy space we're maintaining and have created.
Right, so there's boundaries, there's guidelines, there's proper etiquette and behavior within that to create a sacred space. Right?
Exactly, it's necessary.
So on that note, now some people have been claiming that the mystery school is a sex cult and they're sexually exploiting women. So as a woman, have you ever felt exploited or that there was any inappropriate sexual behavior towards you?
No, and I've heard these accounts, and when I think of, and I've been in Founder Goodney's home and around Sissimus Dave, pardon me, and honestly, they feel like a big brother would. I guess a way to, when I think of like their energy field, I remember the first time like I was in the international studies in Healers Academy, and I think I just graduated. It was like graduation day, and Sissimus Dave was standing there, and I just saw him, and he was hugging different students and such. I was like, oh, congratulations. And I went up and I hugged him, and it was like hugging a wall of light. It was like he disappeared and it was just like of light came through, and it was like, whoa. And I pulled away and it was just like, and he just completely was gone, and then he's just smiling at me, and then that was it. He went on like, oh, that was nothing. So it's almost like when I'm in their field, the type of compassion that they bring to the table is like they just came off of like a really hard day's work, and they come back to the classroom, and we're there, and we're in this safe container, and we feel like everything's great, and they just kind of leave all of what they're holding space for out the door, and they just show up to be like the compassionate big brother. Or like, hey, do you need help with your homework? Okay, great. Oh, you're studying that now. Yeah, here, let me help you with that. Okay, great. Oh, great, you're ready for calculus. Okay, great. Yep, I can help you with that too. It's like they put their own stuff and the picture that they're holding, that they're seeing and holding space for aside, so that they can show up and help the students who really want to be there and learn from them in the moment. And it's never a ego thing. Like sometimes when they set boundaries with us, like I kind of laugh because I know or when they, in Warriors of Light and such, in our martial arts training and so forth, it's like we're all there together and we're sweating and we're running up hills and we're burning calories, but ultimately like we're strengthening our willpower. So they push us, and sometimes it's uncomfortable, but it's like if you want to be a Marine or a Navy SEAL, you got to go through Hell Week. Like, if you don't want to be a ritual master or you don't want to go on that level of training, just don't do it. If you want to be a Navy SEAL, don't sign up for Hell Week, for Pete's sakes. Like, it's that simple.
So would you, do you feel like ever at any point in your interactions with Founder Goodney or Sissimus Dave or Sissimus Hidetto that any of them have ever been inappropriate with you sexually, or do you feel like they are respectful?
I totally feel like they are respectful. I feel like they have a sense of humor and they acknowledge women's beauty, but they respect it, and their wives respect it too. And their wives are stunning. So physically and magic and so forth. So these gentlemen are not in lack by any means. They have no reason to cross a boundary. They're empowered, and they interact with us women and students with a state of compassion, like a big brother. Like, here, let me support you with that. Okay, you ready? Okay, yep. Like they're there ready to meet us where we're at and hold space for us to go further. And the Council of 12 Women as well, for sure.
Yeah. And I personally have found that they are always encouraging our empowerment as women, that they're always encouraging us. I've learned more from them, the men in the Third Order, and the women, the wives. You know, their wives are not just stunning women; they're powerful women.
Yeah, totally.
They're in their own sovereignty. They're in their own power and strength as women, and they're equally serving in that mission in support. Right. You know, with their husbands, and but personally, I've always received so many teachings about empowerment. I've received teachings about, you know, divine feminine, divine masculine. How can we as women really be in authentic empowerment? And we're always being encouraged. But the men I have found, you know, Founder Goodney, Sister Miss Dave, they're like, the women, we are men, we can't teach you how to be a woman. The women need to figure out that empowerment for yourselves. And so they kind of give it back to us. They put that power back in our own hands. They can redirect us when we're getting off track and help us be, nope, that's not quite it, but, you know, keep going. And we're, you know, I have seen the evolution in myself and you and many women in the mystery school, just the level of beautiful and balanced empowerment that comes. And yet each woman has her own unique expression. Each woman is you know, meant to be her own divine being, her own beauty, her own form of that divinity and expression. So there's a lot of empowerment for women in the mystery school, and it is a sisterhood, and yet, you know, very much like a family. Not everybody necessarily always gets along, but we all love each other anyways, because we recognize that there's a community, there's a family, there's something that unites us, which is our devotion to creating a better world, right? To that Shambhala, that world of peace and harmony and balance, and also to our own journey of progression in the path of initiation and healing and coming into greater self-mastery. And those who want to continue along on that path, you know, we grow together. Those who at some point choose to step off that path, we still love them and wish them well. And I personally am in touch with several of them who've stepped off the path. You know, we don't shun them, we don't ostracize anybody. You know, the door's always open if they choose to come back, and some people have. You know, they've left and then they've come back. For sure. Everybody's on their own journey and their own timing, and according to their own free will and choice. And it's a beautiful place to be. So I want to thank you, Lilith, for sharing so much, so beautifully, so openly. Your expression was just flowing from a really authentic place, and I think that people will really benefit from that. And I hope that helps to answer some of your questions and address some of the concerns that have been brought up, or you know, various opinions and accusations that have been thrown at us. But hope you're seeing here that those are not true. So we'll see you later. Thank you for joining us.